Hey guys, it's Chelsea from Little Mountain Ranch, and I am actually coming to you today from Little Mountain Ranch. So we are still on an evacuation order, which means that the fires are still surrounding us and that the ranch is still in danger. However, we have been granted, myself, Dan and Ben have all been granted permits to come in and out and to be able to look after our livestock and to keep the place wet and protected and do all the work that we need to do here. So that we are incredibly grateful for. So the reason that I am up here today is to do just some maintenance. I came up and added some more boxes, some more supers on my hives because my bees were incredibly crammed in there and thankfully did not swarm. To do some chicken butchering because we had a bunch of meat birds that were massively gigantic. You can hear I sound like I have a cold, but it is actually the smoke, and for the most part when I'm outside I am wearing a mask like this just because the smoke is really bad, and I'll show you guys some footage of how it's looking out here today. And then also I'll put in some footage too of last night when I got here along the ridge, which you'll see in this shot. In behind there is where that 40-kilometer long fire guard is that I mentioned in my last video. They were using helicopters with buckets on the bottom because the fire had jumped the guard, but it looks like they did get that under control, and that fire is currently 40% contained, and our side is one of the containment lines, which is just gives me such hope. But the reality of the situation here is that I'm going to put in a map of sort of like the Caribou region, which is where we are, so that you guys can just get an idea of what we're talking about as far as the magnitude of these fires. And when I was coming in on the main road, I'll also show you guys a shot of that, but there's fires you can see off in the distance, and that fire that I'll show you on that shot is actually it's close to 150,000 hectares at this point. So we're talking about massive fires, and I think I'll do some research on this, and then you'll see little white writing that'll tell you the exact statistics here. But it's been a good 40-50 days since we have seen any precipitation of any amount that's really going to make any kind of difference, like more than a couple millimeters. So we're also dealing with with a major drought. And there's two things that are bad about that. The first is, of course, because it's super hot, the firefighters they're not getting a break. The air, there's hardly any humidity, and it's hot. So the ground is dry and everything is burning, and hot spots are flaring up everywhere. But then the second reason is because one of the main issues, or one of the major sort of blows to this region, is that we are a farming cattle area. There's a lot of big ranches out here, and so the ranchers have lost all of their summer grazing. For any of you guys that farm, you understand the economic cost of having to bring your cows in off range and feed them, which is what's happening. And then also those ranchers are having to order in hay, and because it's a drought, hay is incredibly expensive. We're talking about millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars in loss for a lot of the ranchers in this area. So the heat is just not doing anybody any good right now. And then, of course, there's been, I think, over 100 houses lost so far, and then just the forestry. That's the other thing, is our area also has a large forestry industry, and so that's been completely stopped. All the mills have shut down. All the loggers are not working. There's actually a ban almost entirely across British Columbia for any sort of equipment, even ATVs, dirt bikes, anything like that going into the backcountry, because the fire danger is so extreme. So the situation is just not great. And one of the things that I've noticed that happens whenever there's a major disaster is that during the initial stages, kind of for the first week, when it's getting news attention or whatever, then everybody's kind of focused on it and thinking about it, and then after a while it's like people become weary of hearing about it and weary about even thinking about it. I think partly because it's stressful and also because our society has a fairly short attention span. But I'm here to tell you that this particular situation, what we are dealing with here in British Columbia is catastrophic, and it's not letting up. Like, most of the fires have very little containment. They're all out of control, and they're just expanding at such a massive rate. I think at last count, it was over 500,000 or close to 500,000 hectares that have been burned since April 1st, and most of those hectares were burned since July 7th when this particular spat of fires started. So it's pretty major, and for a lot of us that live in rural areas, it is we're still everybody out here is still we're just holding our breath because just because we just don't know. It can just change. One of my my Facebook friends posted a video yesterday of her place. She lives out here too, way more remote than us. Of basically the fires like moving in. She could hear them, hear the trees crashing, like moving in towards her field. And as she's out there on her own, the firefighters all know she's there. But she's basically protecting her property as best she can, because for most of us, we don't live in an area. We're lucky right now because the fire that we are close to, this is a weird thing to be grateful for, but it was one of the ones that was threatening town. So a lot of people, there was a lot of resources funneled into that fire, which has allowed our ranch to be safe. But we're one of the lucky few out here. Really, most people have defended their properties on their own from the fires. And this is not, I want to make this super clear, this is not to say anything negative about all the firefighters that are out there that are working their butts off to protect this province. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the magnitude of what's happening now is so extreme that for the people that live in more remote areas, there's just not the resources to fight every fire and to be on every front. There just isn't. So I'm incredibly grateful for all of the work that all the firefighters are doing here and all the first responders and just I mean, there's just thousands of people that are trying to combat these fires, and they're working like 14 days in a row, 14, 16-hour shifts, and they're fighting monsters here, and they're having a really hard time keeping up with it. We are supposed to, there's ashes. We are supposed to be getting a cold front coming through, and that is supposed to bring with it some lightning here in our region today, and dry lightning. Most likely, there's not a high chance of precipitation, and so that's a big concern for a lot of people out here. But I'm trying not to be just like negative and to just be talking about this particular subject. But I was thinking about this the other day. It's like, this is part of homesteading. I may have mentioned this in another video, but choosing to live in the forest and semi-remote kind of life. This is part of that. This is part of it, is being. I never expected that we would have to leave the ranch I thought there would be other kinds of emergencies that would happen that would allow us to be able to stay here and sort of bug in, so to speak. And we were really well prepared that way. Just not as well prepared, to have to leave it, and not as prepared emotionally. That is for sure. We are on day 29 today of evacuation, so I was not as prepared for that, for sure. But this is part of it. I guess this is part of our life right now. So you're going to hear a lot about forest fires until this is over. I did do a couple of videos prior to our evacuation. There was a tag that I was tagged in from Dan at Home in the Sticks. I did that video, and then there's a video of learning to weld and some other things that I've done that I might throw in there just to give you guys something else to look at besides my long depressed face and smoke and fire. But and anyway, I think you'll probably see lines on my face right here just because I was just doing chores with my mask on, which I'm gonna have to put back on here pretty quick because it is really smoky out here. Again, I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it just can't be said enough. I just want to thank you guys for your good thoughts, your prayers, your well wishes, your kind comments, just even thinking about us, even knowing that there's so many people out there that are thinking about us and wishing the best for our family. Really, really, truly does make a difference to us. So thank you for that. If you guys have any, I know there's some people that are watching these videos that are from this area that may have specific questions. I've been following along with what's happening in more detail about the fire and locations and areas burned and things like that. So if you do have any questions about that, please just put them in the comments and I will do my best to get that information out to you guys, or if there's any other questions you have about how we're doing. Everybody's been asking about the animals. Animals are all doing really, really well. The bees, there's actually a bee buzzing around the camera right now, but the bees have been holding up surprisingly well. I had no idea how they were going to handle the smoke. The smoke's kind of the big issue so far. There's been no animal losses due to the smoke. And I know that's not been the same for a lot of people. A lot of people have been losing a lot of chickens and things like that because of the smoke. And all of our animals have been staying contained in safe areas. So even should the fire get close to us, we also have, I'll actually put in some footage of that too, but just the sprinklers that are all over our property. So this is one of the water bladders, I guess they call it, that the firefighters set up with a pump. And then there is fire hose that you can see right here that's running to all of the buildings with sprinklers on them. You can see down here there's a sprinkler on every building, big sprinklers. And we have the firefighters coming in to check on us. So I feel pretty confident that our house at least will likely be here when this is all over. I just don't know about all the forest around us. So yeah, I guess that's about it. Talk to you guys soon.